about it, huh? What's that? How do you do that?
Right.
It should go in there, no? But how does it stay?
I think it just sits there and
Just sits there. It stays there. Right. Well, yes, I'd like to read some poems for a while. I'm going to begin by reading a few sections from a long poem set on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. On Avenue C, which takes the name in this, which gives its name, gives the name to this poem, the avenue bearing the initial of Christ into the New World. Can you hear me all right in the back? No. All right. There are a few seats in the front. But I'll come, try to come forward a little bit. You could move to the back. Hear better as This is the, this describes the pushcart market that used to be, may still be, on Avenue C between around 5th and 6th Street. This is that section of Manhattan which early in this century was an almost completely Jewish ghetto. And when I moved there in the 50s, it was already disintegrating as an ethnic neighborhood, and all sorts of people of all sorts of religions and and backgrounds lived there. Still, however, had a kind of Jewish spirit presiding over everyone who entered the area. In the pushcart market on Sunday, a crate of lemons discharges light like a battery. Icicle-shaped carrots that through black soil wove away lie like flames in the sun. Onions with their shirts ripped seek sunlight on green skins. Beets dirty as boulders. The sun beats on beets dirty as boulders in cowfields, on turnips pinched and gibbous from budging rocks, on horseradishes still growing weeds on the flat ends, on cabbages lying about like sea-green brains the skulls have been shucked from, on tomatoes, undented plum tomatoes, alligator-skinned cucumbers that float pickled in the wooden tubs of green skim milk, sky flowers, dirt flowers, under-dirt flowers, those that climbed for the sun in their lives, and those that wormed away, equally uprooted, maimed, lopped, shucked, and misaimed. In the market in Damascus, a goat came to a stall where 12 goat heads were lined up for sale. It sniffed them one by one. Finally, 13 goats started smiling in their faintly sardonic way. A crone buys a pickle from a crone. It is wrapped in the mirror. At home she will open the wrapping, stained, and stare and stare and stare at it. And the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. Well, just behind the vegetable market was the fish market, and I'll read that section too. There is in this section a letter, which a form letter, which I quote verbatim from a book I was reading at the time about the German extermination, the Nazi extermination camps. The fish market closed, the fishes gone into flesh, the smelts draped on each other, fat with roe, the marble cod hacked into chunks on the counter, butterfishes, mouths still open, still trying to eat, porgies with receding jaws hinged apart in a grimace of dejection, as if, like cows, they had died under the sledgehammer. Perches in grass-green armor, spotted squeetigs in the melting ice, meek-faced and croaking no more, mud-eating mullets buried in crushed ice, tile fishes with scales like bits of chicken fat, Spanish mackerels with buttercups on the flanks, pot-bellied pikes, two-tone flounders, after the long contortion of pushing both eyes to the brown side that they might look up, lying brown side down like a mass laying on of hands or the oath-taking of an army. The only things alive are the carp that drift in the black tank in the rear, kept living for the usual reason that they have not died, and perhaps because the last meal was garbage and they might begin smelling on dying before the customer got halfway home. They nudge each other to be netted, the sweet flesh to be lifted thrashing into the air, to be slugged, and then to keep on living while they are opened on the counter. Fishes do not die, exactly. It is more that they go out of themselves. The visible part remains the same. There is little pallor. Only the cataracted eyes that have not shut ever must look through the mist that crazed Homer. These are the vegetables of the deep, Sheol flowers of the darkness, swimmers of denser darknesses where the sun's rays bend for the last time, and in the sky there burns this shifty jellyfish that degenerates and flashes and reforms. Fishes are nailed to the wood. The big Jew stands like Christ nailing them to the wood. He scrapes the knife up the grain. The scales fly. He unnails them, reverses them, nails them again, scrapes, and the scales fly. He lops off the heads, shakes out the guts as if they did not belong in the first place, and they are flesh for the first time in their lives. Dear Frau Blank, your husband Blank died in the camp hospital on Blank. May I express my sincere sympathy on your bereavement. Blank was admitted to the hospital on Blank with severe symptoms of exhaustion, complaining of difficulties in breathing and pains in the chest. Despite competent medication and devoted medical attention, it proved impossible, unfortunately, to keep the patient alive. The deceased voiced no final requests. Camp Commandant Blank. On 5th Street, Bunko, certified embalmer, Catholic, leans in his doorway, drawing on a natural bloom cigar. He looks up the street. Even the Puerto Ricans are Jews, and the Chinese laundry closes on Saturday. Well, I was asked to read a poem called The Bear, which I will get out of the way now. Can you hear me in the back? All right. There are some chairs, quite a number of chairs in the front, if you have trouble. No point in straining your ear muscles. On the other hand, when I go to a poetry reading, I like to sit near the door in case. Well, this poem is based on a bear hunt that I never took part in. It's purely a fictional account. The Eskimos used to take I guess it was a fishbone, though in my account of it in the poem, it turns out to be a wolf's rib. A fishbone they would coil up and freeze it in a piece of fat, and place these booby-trapped lumps of blubber here and there where bears were known to pass. And when a bear would swallow one, the fat would melt in the bear's stomach, and the bone would spring open and puncture the stomach and cause the bear to bleed internally to death. And it would take a long time for the bear to die, of course, and the hunter would pursue the bear until it died, living on whatever he could manage to live on in the process. In late winter, I sometimes glimpse bits of steam coming up from some fault in the old snow, and bend close and see it is lung-colored, and put down my nose and know the chilly, enduring odor of bear. I take a wolf's rib and whittle it sharp at both ends, and coil it up and freeze it in blubber, and place it out on the fairway of the bears. And when it has vanished, I move out on the bear tracks, roaming in circles until I come to the first tentative dark splash on the earth. And I set out running, following the splashes of blood wandering over the world. At the cut, gashed resting places, I stop and rest. At the crawl marks where he lay out on his belly to overpass some stretch of botchy ice, I lie out, dragging myself forward with bear knives in my fists. On the third day, I begin to starve. At nightfall, I bend down as I knew I would, at a turd sopped in blood, and hesitate, and pick it up, and thrust it in my mouth, and gnash it down, and rise and go on running. On the seventh day, living by now on bear blood alone, I can see his upturned carcass far out ahead, a scraggled, steamy hulk, the heavy fur riffling in the wind. I come up to him and stare at the narrow-spaced, petty eyes, the dismayed face laid back on a shoulder, the nostrils flared, catching, perhaps, the first taint of me as he died. I hack a ravine in his thigh and eat and drink and tear him down his whole length and open him and climb in and close him up after me against the wind and sleep and dream of lumbering flat-footed over the tundra, stabbed twice from within, splattering a trail behind me, splattering it out no matter which way I lurch, no matter which parabola of bare transcendence, which dance of solitude I attempt, which gravity-clutched leap, which trudge, which groan, until one day I totter and fall on this stomach that has tried so hard to keep up, to digest the blood as it leaked in, to break up and digest the bone itself. And now the breeze blows over me, blows off the hideous belches of ill-digested bear blood and rotted stomach and the ordinary wretched odor of bear, blows across my sore, lolled tongue a song or screech until I think I must rise up and dance, and I lie still. I awaken, I think. Marsh lights reappear. Geese come trailing again up the flyway. In her ravine under old snow, the dam bear lies, licking lumps of smeared fur and drizzly eyes into shapes with her tongue. And one hairy-souled trudge stuck out before me, the next groaned out, the next. The rest of my days I spend wandering, wondering what anyway was that sticky infusion, that rank flavor of blood, that poetry by which I lived. Now there are some seats in the front if you want to come in. Well, I was going from the London airport to from London to one of those airports. I think it was Gatwick Airport, where Freddie Laker flies out of, and there was a woman crying in the bus. Well, I mean, she was in the bus and crying, I shouldn't say. And she was leaving some life that she didn't want to leave, I guess. And somebody sitting next to her, I overheard this person next to her trying to comfort her, and he said, well, don't cry so much, or something like that. And she said, well, crying only a little bit is no use. Is there a singer here? Someone with an operatic voice? Yes? I need you to sing.
I've never sang a note in my life.
You have a good voice. You might have a career. No, I'm serious, because there's just one syllable here that really's got to be sung, I think. But anyway, it's your loss. The ha-ha has to be sung, and I can't do it. So I'm just going to say it. You must cry until your pillow is soaked. Then you can wake up and laugh. Ha-ha. See? See, it lacks something. I don't know, maybe I ought to stop and I'll try it. You must cry until your pillow is soaked. Then you can wake up and laugh. Ha-ha. Then you can get in the shower and splash, splash, splash. Then you can throw open your window and ha-ha, ha-ha. And if people say, hey, what's going on up there? Ha-ha, I see it. Ha-ha, ha-ha. Well, that's all it is. It's it's a piece for voice, not to be read. That's the last time I'm going to attempt that poem. The milk tooth. The milk tooth comes out and turns into a wish that does not come true until it feels the weight of a child's dreaming brain upon it. Woodsmen. They're chainsawing logs up for pulp in the snowfield. The smile of tree spills itself again and again, golden into the snow. Looking at your face. Looking at your face now you have become ready to die is like kneeling at an old gravestone on an afternoon without sun, trying to read the white chiselings of the poem in the white stone. Kissing the toad. Somewhere this dusk, the girl puckers her mouth and considers kissing the toad the boy has just plucked from the cornland and hands her in both hands, rough and lichenous, but for that immense ivory belly, like those old entrepreneurs sunning at Mediterranean resorts. With popped eyes, it watches the girl who might kiss it and tries to make its smile wider, to love on, oh yes, to love on. Well, this is a... do any of you want to come in and sit down, or do you like it in the doorway? It's all... And actually, some at this point might want to go out. That would be a good time to have a changing of the guards here. I do believe that of all human events, the poetry reading is the most difficult to attend. You often see people at concerts who walk in and fall fast asleep immediately and get up at the end of the concert and cry, bravo. And that's because, of course, while they're sleeping, the music has nevertheless been flowing through their brain and doing them a great deal of good, because they look good, they look very refreshed at the end of the concert. A poetry reading, however, if you don't pay attention to the words, only gives you that peculiar monotonous drone in which poems like these are often read. And yet it's very hard to pay attention to the words, to the meanings of the poems, because we've lost that capacity to a large degree. We're used to reading things off a page, or when we do hear them on television, there's always some kind of image surrounding the whatever speech is being given to us, so that the context of the visual context provides half the meaning. But here, with a poem dealing with, I admit, sometimes odd or arcane subjects, such as that bear hunt, you have nothing to help you. You just, through oral attention, have to hear and understand, and that's very difficult. And probably after 10 minutes of it, some people might find their brains have been strained adequately, and I would understand anybody leaving at this point, because in fact I would admire those who left, because I would realize those are the ones who've been listening and who are now exhausted. And the rest of you who stay are still fresh only because you've been daydreaming. Well, here's another poem. It's called The Porcupine, and it's about those creatures who come around at night and eat things around farms and houses to get presumably to get the salt out of them, the salt from our sweat. And so they always eat the things we've handled most and soaked our sweat into most deeply. And so they seem to be eating up our traces after us. And that's why farmers kill them, either shooting them out of trees where they like to sleep in the daytime, or taking a club and swatting them across the snout. Well, it goes like this. Fatted on herbs, swollen on crab apples, puffed up on bast and phloem, ballooned on willow flowers, poplar catkins, first leaves of aspen and larch. The porcupine drags and bounces his last meal through ice, mud, roses, and goldenrod into the stubbly high fields. In character, he resembles us in 7 ways. He puts his mark on outhouses. He alchemizes by moonlight. He shits on the run. He uses his tail for climbing. He chuckles softly to himself when scared. He's overcrowded if there's more than one of him per 5 acres. His eyes have their own inner redness. Digger of goings across floors, of hesitations at thresholds, of handprints of dread at doorpost or window jamb. He would gouge the world empty of us, hack and crater it until it is nothing, if that could rid it of all our sweat and pathos. Adorer of axe handles aflow with grain, of arms of Morris chairs, of handcrafted objects steeped in the juice of fingertips, of surfaces wetted down with fist grease and elbow oil, of clothespins that have grabbed our body rags by underarm and crotch. Unimpressed, bored by the whirl of the stars. By these, he's astonished, ultra-Rilkean angel, for whom the true portion of the sweetness of earth is one of those bottom-heavy, glittering, saccadic bits of salt water that splash down the haunted ravines of a human face. A farmer shot a porcupine 3 times as it dozed on a tree limb. On the way down, it tore open its belly on a broken branch, hooked its gut, and went on falling. On the ground, it sprang to its feet, and paying out gut, heaved and sparkled through 100 feet of goldenrod before the abrupt emptiness. The Avesta puts porcupine killers into hell for 9 generations, sentencing them to gnaw out each other's hearts for the salts of desire. I roll this way and that in the great bed, under the quilt that mimics this country of broken farms and woods, the fatty sheath of the man melting off, the self-stabbing coil of bristles reversing, blossoming outward, a red-eyed, hard-toothed, arrow-stuck urchin, tossing up mattress feathers, pricking the woman beside me until she cries. In my time I have crouched, quills erected, Saint Sebastian of the scared heart, and been beat dead with a locust club on the bare snout. And fallen from high places I have fled, have jogged over fields of goldenrod, terrified, seeking home. And among flowers I have come to myself empty, the rope strung out behind me in the fall sun, suddenly glorified with all my blood. And tonight, I think I prowl broken-skulled, or vacant as a sucked egg in the wintry meadow, softly chuckling blank template of myself, dragging a starved belly through the lich-flowered acres, where burdock looses the arc of its seed, and thistle holds up its lost bloom, and rose bushes in the wind scrape their dead limbs for the forced fire of roses. Well, there's a poet whose name is Etheridge Knight, who wrote his first book of poems while a prisoner in Indiana, the Indiana State Penitentiary, who spent quite a number of years. The book was published while he was still a prisoner. I ran across his first book. It was called Poems from Prison in a Detroit bookstore about 10 years ago, I think. almost 10 years ago. And I just opened it up, and I was immediately riveted by the poetry. And when Etheridge Knight came out of prison, I got to know him, and like everybody who got to know him, I became extremely fond of him. And also, like everybody who got to know him, extremely worried about him, because it always seemed, and still seems, that he's going to do himself in one way or another. So during one of these periods of worry about him, I wrote this little poem to scold him. It's called Brother of My Heart. Brother of my heart, don't you know there's only one walking into the light? Only one before this light flashes out, before this bravest knight crashes his black bones into the earth. You will not come back among us to put our world into your songs again, your cried out face laughing, because those who die by the desire to die maybe can love their way back, but as moles or worms who grub into the first sorrow and lie there. Therefore, as you are, this once, this lifetime only, in this world where you will not go on singing forever, sing, even if you cry. The braveness of the crying turns it into the true song. Soul brother in heaven, on earth, broken heart brother, sing to us here in this place that loses its brothers, in this emptiness only the singing sometimes almost fills. Well, this is a section from a long poem. And it involves a woman whose name is Virginia, who lives by the Juniata River, which I believe is in the southern part of this very state. And I never met her, but we corresponded for a long time. And I quote from two of her letters in the course of the poem. And you can, I guess, gather from the letters the kind of spiritual life she led. The poem begins in some kind of rundown hotel, where I'm in some bed that some old man has recently died in, and then it sort of goes out in thought to this rural, this idyllic, supposedly idyllic rural place near the Juniata River. Dear stranger, extant in memory by the blue Juniata, having given up on the desk man who was to have banged "It is morning" on the police-locked sheet metal door, I can hear the chime of the old tower, tinny sacring bell, drifting out over the city, chime of our loves, the peristalsis of the will to love forever, drives down, grain after grain, into the last coldest room, which is memory. And listen for the maggots inhabiting beds old men have died in, to crawl out, to break into the brain and cut the nerves that keep the book of solitude. Dear Galway, it began late one April night when I couldn't sleep. It was the dark of the moon. My hand felt numb. The pencil went over the page, drawn on its way by I don't know what, circles and figure eights and mandalas. I cried, had to drop the pencil. I was shaking. I went to bed and tried to pray. At last, relaxed. Then I felt my mouth open. My tongue moved. My breath, not my own. The whisper which forced itself through my teeth said, Virginia, your eyes shine back to me from my own world. Oh God, I thought. My breath came short, my heart opened. Oh God, I thought, now I have a demon lover. Yours, faithless to this life, Virginia. At dusk, by the blue Juniata, a rural America, the magazine said, now vanished but extant in memory, a primal garden lost forever. You see, I told Mama, we just think we're here. The root hunters go out into the woods, pull up love roots from the virginal glades, bend the stalks over shovel handles and lever them up, the huge bass final thump as each root unclutches from its spot. Take kettle of blue water, boil over twig fire of ashwood, grind root, throw in, let macerate, reheat over ashes, bottle, stopper with thumb of dead man, ripen 40 days in horse dung in the wilderness, drink, sleep. And when you rise, if you do rise, it will be in the Sothic year, made of the raised salvages of the fragments all unaccomplished of years past, scraps and jettisons of time mortality could not grind down into his meal of blood and laughter. And if there is one more love to be known, one more poem to be opened into life, you will find it here or nowhere. Your hand will move on its own down the curving path, drawn down by the terror and terrible lure of vacuum. A face materializes into your hands. On the absolute whiteness of pages, a poem writes itself out. Its title, the dream of all poems and the text of all loves, tenderness toward existence. On this bank, our bank of the blue vanished waters, you lie crying in your bed, hearing those small, fearsome thrumps of leave-taking, trespassing the virginal woods at dusk. I too have eaten the meals of the dark shore, in time's own mattress, where a sag shaped as a body lies next to a sag, graves tossed into it by those who came before, lovers or loving friends or strangers who loved here or ground their nightmare teeth here or talked away their one-night stands. The Sanctus bell going out each hour to die against the sheet-glass city. I lie without sleeping, remembering the ripped body of hen, the warmth of its flesh frightening my hand, all her desires blooming again in the starlight. And then the wait. Not long, I grant, but all my life for the small, soft thud of her return among the stones. Can it ever be true? All bodies, one body, one light made of everyone's darkness together. Dear Galway, I have no one to turn to because God is my enemy. He gave me lust and joy and cut off my hands. My brain is smothered with his blood. I asked, why should I love this body I fear? He said, it is so lordly, It can never be shaped again, dear shining casket. Have you never been so proud of a thing you wanted it for your prey? His voice chokes my throat. Soul of asps, master and taker, he wants to kill me. Forgive my blindness. Yours in the darkness, Virginia. Dear stranger, extant in memory by the blue Juniata, these letters across space, I guess, will be all we will know of one another. So little of what one is threads itself through the eye of empty space. Never mind, the self is the least of it. Let our scars fall in love. Well, I think I'd like to read another section from this poem about the same length. Has to do with, it begins when the person who's speaking goes into a room where a little child has waked up in the middle of the night, and it ends when the child falls back to sleep. The word CG is Old French for, and used now only on gravestones, here lies. And the child's name is Maud. It's called Little Sleep's Head Sprouting Hair in the Moonlight. When I sleepwalk into your room and pick you up and hold you up in the moonlight, you cling to me hard, as if clinging could save us. I think, you think, I will never die. I think I exude to you the permanence of smoke or stars, even as my broken arms heal themselves around you. I have heard you tell the sun, don't go down. I have stood by as you told the flower, don't grow old, don't die. Little Maud, I would blow the flame out of your silver cup. I would suck the rot from your fingernail. I would brush your sprouting hair of the dying light. I would scrape the rust off your ivory bones. I would help death escape through the little ribs of your body. I would alchemize the ashes of your cradle back into wood. I would let nothing of you go, ever, until washerwomen feel the clothes fall asleep in their hands, and rats walk away from the cultures of the plague, and iron twists weapons toward the true north, and Greece refuses to slide in the machinery of progress, and men feel as free on earth as fleas on the bodies of men. And yet, perhaps, this is the reason you cry. This, the nightmare you wake crying from, being forever in the pre-trembling of a house that falls. Yes, you cling because I, like you, only sooner than you, will go down the path of vanished alphabets. Your arms like the shoes left behind, like the adjectives in the halting speech of very old men that used to be able to call up the forgotten nouns. And you yourself, some impossible Tuesday in the year 2009, will walk out among the stones of the field in the rain, the stones saying over their one word, CG, and the raindrops hitting you on the fontanelle over and over, and you standing there, unable to let them in. If one day it happens, you find yourself with someone you love in a cafe at one end of the Pont Mirabeau, at the zinc bar where white wine stands in upward opening glasses. And if you commit then, as we did, the error of thinking, one day all this will only be memory. Learn to reach deeper into the sorrows to come, to touch the almost imaginary bones under the face, to hear under the laughter the wind crying across the stones. Kiss the mouth that tells you, here is the world, this mouth, this laughter, these temple bones, the still, undanced cadence of vanishing. In the light the moon sends back, I can see in your eyes a hand that waved once in my father's eyes, a tiny kite wobbling far up in the twilight of his last look, and the angel of all mortal things lets go the string. Back you go into your crib. The last blackbird lights up his gold wings. Farewell. Your eyes close inside your head in sleep. Already in your dreams the hours begin to sing. Little sleep's head sprouting hair in the moonlight. When I come back, we will go out together. We will walk out together among the 10,000 things, each scratched in time with such knowledge. The wages of dying is love. Well, I want to stop by reading another very short little section, a little brief section about from the last part of this poem about the birth of a little boy with the unlikely name of Sancho Fergus. A black bear sits alone in the twilight, nodding from side to side, turning slowly around and around on himself, scuffing the four-footed circle into the earth. He sniffs the sweat in the breeze. He understands a creature, a death creature, watches from the fringe of the trees. Finally, he understands, I am no longer here. He himself, from the fringe of the trees, watches a black bear get up, eat a few flowers, trudge away, all his fur glistening in the rain. And what glistening? Sancho Fergus, my boy child, had such great shoulders. When he was born, his head came out, the rest of him stuck, and he opened his eyes, his head out there all alone in the room. He squinted with pained, barely unglued eyes at the 9th month's blood splashing beneath him on the floor, and almost smiled, I thought, almost forgave it all in advance. And when he came wholly forth, I took him up in my hands and bent over and smelled the black, glistening fur of his head, as empty space must have bent over the newborn planet and smelled the grasslands and the ferns. Well, so much for the reading. Now, we have 10 minutes if any of you want to ask questions, but I think this would be a good opportunity for those of you who don't want to ask questions to depart. Oh, I should put this on. Still. If you want to go, then go. And if you want to ask some questions, ask away. But we'll wait a few minutes for those to leave. She was a very troubled person, as you can tell, and we had a long correspondence. She wrote I thought, really stunning letters, and then I think she was so so troubled that she couldn't even work. She just lived at home, and her parents, you know, regarded her as a real emotional cripple.
She was young.
Yeah, she was probably in her early 20s when she was writing to me.
Yeah, I pictured her.
As an old woman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh, no, well, I 10 years ago.
Well, I don't know. The last I heard of her, she wrote, the last letters I have from her were very happy letters. She had taken up with a born-again sect, and she was born again. And I don't know how long that will last, but anyway, for the moment, it seems to be doing her some good. Yeah.
Well, she's not writing letters.
No, but oddly enough, just at the time she stopped writing me letters, another person in southern Pennsylvania, who lived not too far away, but completely unknown, started writing me very similar letters. So I correspond with her now.
In your poem, The Wolves, you mentioned a sensitive briar. What was the significance of that?
Well, the sensitive briar was actually a kind of plant which, when you touched it, it closed up, you know. And well, at the time I wrote that poem, which was in my early 20s, I used symbols. I don't anymore, I don't think. And so that was symbolic, you know, of the land, that when these these people reached out to touch it, it shrank away from them.
How do you react to people claiming they found symbols in your poems that you don't?
Well, I don't mind people finding symbols, but I feel that that before that, the actual physical reality of the thing must be dealt with, and so that sensitive briar in the wolf poem doesn't really have any physical reality. It's just a symbol. But I don't think anything ever occurs in the poems I write now which is just a symbol. I might be wrong. But so I don't really think it's a good idea, a good practice to, in general with poetry, quite apart from my own case, to try to find the symbolism. I think that's a kind of an academic procedure. That is to say, it's encouraged by professors, because when you come into a class and you have to discuss a poem, it's one thing you can do, right? What is this a symbol of? It's a kind of formal undertaking that makes teaching easier.
Is there any way to teach besides picking out symbolism in work?
Oh, I think there probably is.
What would it be? I'm curious.
Well, I don't know. It would involve, first of all, a lot of reading aloud of poems, even memorizing poems, knowing them by heart, because I think there's a sense in which if you don't know a poem by heart, you don't really know it at all. And an examination would probably consist of having the poems printed out or Xeroxed out or something with a lot of key words missing, a lot of the most interesting words missing. The examination would consist of asking the student to fill in those missing words. So they wouldn't be required to memorize the poem, but only to know it so well that automatic memory would bring back.
They would know what it would be about.
They would know what that. And so you would give them a full credit, even if even if they didn't get the word right, if they had a word that sounded like it, you would give them full credit, because that would mean that their oral memory was functioning. They were they were knowing the poem as a physical thing and not merely a discourse about ideas. They were actually hearing it and remembering it as sound, as actual speech. And then I would think you'd try to get students to tell what poems they hated or why, what poems they loved and why, and tie the poem to their feelings, if you could, over a period of time, instead of thinking of the poem as something out there which can be formally analyzed in terms of diction, tone, meter, symbolism, etc. That would be my idea.
Have you tried it?
Yeah.
How did it go?
I thought it went all right.
Did you ask the students?
They seemed to like it all right. They liked those examinations. They were horrified when I told them how they were going to be tested. But by the end of it, they loved those examinations, and they all were getting A's on them. It was so easy. All you had to do was read the poem many times. You didn't have to worry about what meters was in or anything else, but just know it.
Well, why does bad poetry generate much more enthusiasm than good poetry?
Does it? I didn't know that. What did you have in mind?
Well, I'm saying the popular verse, saying things that people will really respond to. You know, they come up, you'll have to read this.
Washington.
Rod
McEwen.
Rod McEwen. Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose Rod McEwen is popular. I never hear anybody mention him anymore. I suspect that is no longer the case. It may be that there is a kind of a mass interest in some poet like Rod McEwen, but there's a very large audience for poetry, which I think is first rate, very large. It's quite a different situation from the time when you and I were in our 20s, when I think that was true, that when was that? Way back when James Whitcomb Riley was first writing? But I think if you go into a bookstore, a reasonably good bookstore, and they have, generally speaking, have quite a large selection of very good poetry. And well, it's true, they have Khalil Gibran and Rod McEwen, but that's a small part of it.
It's a beginning, though.
What?
It's a beginning, though. It's a,
Yeah, sure.
It's a place from which to go. It's better than nobody reading anything.
The reason that people like it is that it's so accessible, and I would never discourage anybody from reading Rod McEwen. I mean, I think if they love Rod McEwen, they should be encouraged. They should love Rod McEwen till they're sick.
Didn't they start climbing up a little more?
Could be. I loved James Whitcomb Riley when I was around 14. You're full of all sorts of sloppy and turbid emotional waves at that time. Anything which hints at something you're experiencing, some kind of romantic turmoil that you're going through, can capture you very, very deeply. And some of the poems, of course, that one reads in that time stay with you always. And I'm always moved when I read Annabel Lee, for example. Though I'm sure I read it with the same, in the same spirit in which I read Robert Service and James Whitcomb Riley and Khalil Gibran and Don Blanding, that whole group. Service is good too, a different way. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up.
The Malamute Saloon.
Was a beating a ragtime tune. When out of the dark, there was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbled a miner. Can you say it?
No, did you do Night in the Ruins, though?
What?
Night in the Ruins?
Oh, Night in the Ruins. Well, the shooting of Dan McGrew is very close to Night in the Ruins. Ruins in the night, you could call that. Do you want me to read that poem?
Yeah.
Yes, we've got to stop. So I'll read that poem and then stop. Another Night in the Ruins. How's it go? If I could get the first line, I think I would have it. Where is it? In the evening haze darkening on the hills, purple of the eternal, a last bird crosses over, flop, flop, adoring only the instant. 9 years ago, in a plane that rumbled all night above the Atlantic, I could see, lit up by lightning bolts jumping out of it, a thunderhead formed like the face of my brother, looking nostalgically down on blue, lightning-flashed moments of the Atlantic. He used to tell me, what good is the day? On some hill of despair, the bonfire you kindle can light the great sky. Though it's true, of course, to make it burn, you have to throw yourself in. Wind tears itself hollow in the eaves of my ruins. Ghost flute of snowdrifts that build out there in the dark, upside down ravines into which night sweeps our torn wings, our ink-spattered feathers. I listen, I hear nothing, only the cow of nothingness, mooing down the bones. Is that a rooster? He thrashes in the snow for a grain, finds it, rips it into flames, flaps, crows, flames bursting out of his brow. How many nights must it take one such as me to learn that we aren't, after all, made from that bird which flies out of its ashes, that for a man, as he goes up in flames, his one work is to open himself, to be the flames.